I am so pleased to share today's episode with you. After many months of playing email tag, going back and forth, I was able to catch Charlie Bird while he was at work. And I'm so grateful to him for taking time out of his busy schedule to chat with me. Listen as he shares his very real and vulnerable and raw story of coming to terms, learning to love himself, and releasing the shame and internalized homophobia that he grew up with. I loved when he likened his journey with God, with the divine, like walking across a glass stairway that's over the Grand Canyon, and one step at a time is placed before him. And you can see through this glass. It looks unsteady. It doesn't look very sturdy. But each time one of these steps is placed in front of him and he trusts, good things come, and he sees why these steps are being placed in his path. So make sure to give it a listen and listen all the way to the end, where I ask my for fun questions as he shares who his celebrity crush was when he was younger. And it's a Disney character, believe it or not. Anyway, on to today's episode. I'm Megan Skidmore. For 2.5 years, I have been talking about evolving faith journeys. I started to tire of the heaviness of this focus. I had the clear message come through. It is time for Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast to evolve into Living Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast. With the same vulnerability and unapologetic authenticity, I will be focusing on the joy in this journey, the life and the living that comes on the other side of maybe, on the other side of what's possible. I want to talk about claiming spiritual sovereignty and becoming your own captain of your vessel. Let's celebrate releasing what no longer aligns for you and connecting with your higher power, and honor expanding your energy field to make room for all things new. There is a lot going on in the world today. What practices do you have in place that help you recenter, get grounded, connect to your inner wisdom, and remember you are powerful? On the first Friday of each month, I host a coaching session that anyone is welcome to join. I invite you to get a glimpse into my world and what I do. In this monthly call, I will guide participants in sessions, essentially teaching you to increase your awareness of your energy in your body and the messages available to you. I would be so honored to have you on the call. Simply register at the link in the show notes. So, hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode of Living Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. It feels a bit miraculous, but also fantastic and spectacular to have Charlie Bird with me here today. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here.
I'm very happy that you were able to be here. This has been a little bit in coming. So thank you for making time out of your schedule. If you've been listening to my podcast, you know that I've been talking about faith journeys and how each one of them is as unique as the individual that is experiencing it. And no two are alike, and it's meant to be that way. And they're very sacred and very personal. And so I found last year at some point, though, I was starting to feel kind of heavy, because sometimes there are very heavy things that come up as part of this journey. And so I decided in 2025, I'll still talk about the tough parts, but I also really want to highlight and focus on the joy and the life, the living that comes after one steps into that unknown, that uncertain, claims their spiritual sovereignty, their authority, and lives their spiritual / faith / religious life in accordance with what feels aligned for them inside. I think it's such a beautiful thing that I believe more people would just benefit from by doing so.
I love that term, spiritual sovereignty.
Do
That's
you?
nice. Did you make that up?
I'd like
I
to say
think you
yes,
did.
but
We're giving you credit for it right here. It's wonderful.
I feel like so much of what I share is kind of this conglomerate of all the podcasts I listen to, the books that I read, the people that I talk to. I don't know, to be honest with you, but it resonates for me
Yeah, it's beautiful.
because I truly believe we are all sovereigns. We are. And I have found so much peace and joy as I have claimed my own. So I am really excited, Charlie, to hear straight from you about how you have done that in your life because you are very front and center. You have
Yeah.
a conscious choice you kind of put yourself in the crosshairs, and that's so brave and so courageous. But I know it's because you have experienced true joy and true peace that comes by taking the reins of your journey
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you.
and listening to your inner voice. Sure.
Let's
So
talk about it. What do you want to know?
let's do. I don't know that you really need an introduction, but you know, I think most people listening, they know you were Cosmo the Cougar. They know that you went to BYU. They probably know that you got your master's as well, and that you're a therapist, you're a counselor. They probably know that you and Ryan married. It's been over a year now. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. A year and a half.
year and a half. Wow. I don't know. You still consider yourselves newlyweds?
I think so. There's still a lot to learn, and it feels pretty fresh to us still.
I think when kids come is when that phase kind of phases out. And I don't know if that's on the books for you guys, and y'all don't need to share that.
I don't know either.
Awesome. I love that answer. But I wonder if maybe a little bit less known about you, Charlie, is kind of your origin story. I know you're from the Midwest because I've read your book, Without the Mask. I know you were raised in the LDS faith. But that's one thing I love to start off with, kind of a jumping off point. Like, tell us about your upbringing and your family and, all of the things that kind of contributed and molded you to who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, I grew up in Southwest Missouri in a small town called Willard, and I grew up. Um, my my dad was a cattle rancher, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I grew up in this lovely big old farmhouse with a ton of acres behind it, and I just kind of there were old barns on the property, and I would explore with my two older sisters, and there were hay fields, and so like childhood to me is jumping on hay bales and pretending like pretending to create potions in the dirt. It was a very like tactile. I loved it. I had the most beautiful childhood. We had cattle and horses, and I feel like I always had some sort of random animal because I was like this
Mhm.
empathetic animal rescuer, and so I'd find like a squirrel or a baby deer or a turkey, or at one time I was rehabilitating a coyote, and my family was like, this is a little too much, like you're not going to domesticate this thing. But
Oh,
it was really great,
goodness.
and like you mentioned, yeah, it was raised strongly rooted in the church. Both my grandparents, I had pioneer ancestry, and it was a very small ward, and there aren't very many church members where I grew up, so I feel like it actually made the community much tighter, even though like ward and stake boundaries were miles.
Yeah.
Like I would go home teaching, no, back when it was called home teaching
Well, yeah, I
with
get it.
my dad,
Ministry, all of those. Yeah.
and we'd drive 45 minutes to an hour to visit someone in the ward. Um, but it was a really a tight knit community, and um, yeah, my childhood was, to me, it seemed very perfect. It was really um, lovely until it kind of wasn't.
Okay.
Um, when I was like 13 or 14, a lot changed in my family. Some huge financial hardships, like full bankruptcy, evicted from home, cars were taken by the bank. It was very disruptive.
Oh,
In that same time frame, my parents separated. There was a lot of stress. My dad stepped away from the church. It just a lot changed in a matter of months.
wow.
And so when we talk about like spiritual shifts, I think that was probably the first time that I experienced any type of relational shift in my life. New house,
Mhm.
new new everything, and that was the first time that I really started kind of questioning like what does that mean now? What does an internal family mean now that my parents are divorced? What does family relationship look like now that we're not all active at church? Um, what is testimony when it's been tried? And
How old
I,
were
in
you? Sorry.
14, like 13 or 14.
14. Okay.
Yeah. And then along with that, I think there was a lot of personal responsibility that fell on me. I had two younger siblings, and I felt my mom was working nights at the hospital and days as a nurse at the school and
Yeah.
sleeping for like 3 hours. And so like there was just so much shifted. And I think um, me and my two older sisters, we kind of took on a much more adult role as children still. And I think in a lot of ways that was difficult, but in some ways it was a blessing because it got me thinking about um, what I believe
Hmm.
and having to like stand up for my beliefs at a very young age.
Yeah. Most don't. I think I found that those who tend not to grow up outside of, I don't know, sometimes I call it the Mormon Belt, Idaho, Utah,
Yeah.
Arizona, they tend to have that phenomena earlier in life. But I can only imagine that coupled with all of the upheaval, I guess, of what you knew as normal.
Yeah, it was interesting because a mixture of like even just like because of where we lived, there weren't very many church members. So at school, the Mormon kids, which were mostly me and my cousins and second
Uh-huh.
cousins, right? We were
Mhm.
kind of anomalies. And so I think I was also introduced to like scary or questionable aspects of church history combined with like intense anti-Mormon rhetoric at a really young age too. And that was happening at school and then happened even more when my dad was stepping away from the church. And so some of the things that in Utah, like adults confront or discover, I knew very, very young. And I think that all came, to me, it felt like all of that came to a head when I was 14,
Okay.
where I'm really working through race in the priesthood as a 14-year-old. I am learning about, you know, um, the Mountain Meadows massacre in seventh grade, and doing that research for myself. And it was tough. Like it was really, really
Yeah.
hard to figure out like what's true, what's not true.
Yeah. How did you navigate that? That is a lot um, to be confronted with at 14. I remember getting confronted with an article from Cosmopolitan magazine about the temple ceremony, and that's because some ladies at work, I lived in Indiana growing up,
Yeah.
and that was my first introduction to, and yeah, it can be traumatic when you're in your teens like that.
I, looking back, I guess I did the best job I could. But I think that's when I started focusing a little more on basics. Like, and I
Okay.
wasn't scared. I asked a lot of questions, and I actually I was uncomfortable with some of the information, but I don't ever think I was scared of it.
Okay.
Which looking back, I'm glad, because I would research as much as I could, and then if I started feeling like it was causing me too much, then I would just step back and focus on also.
Hmm.
And again, I will be the first to admit that I'm looking at all of this through my adult eyes, you know,
True.
and
True.
it's been however many years. But I asked questions. I went to seminary. I studied. I read the scriptures. I read Jesus the Christ. I read the standard works. I really tried to root myself in things that
Uh-huh.
did feel like powerful and true to me, and then use that as like a springboard for taking on some of these other topics that felt a
Mhm.
lot more stressful and too big for me.
Do you think you parked some of them for a while
Well,
at that time?
for
Hmm.
sure, because simultaneously I'm dealing with the crippling shame of being gay, not only
Hmm.
in the church, but also in rural Missouri.
Fair.
Um,
Fair.
and
Yeah.
so, and also like the intense responsibility of family, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it,
Uh,
at the time it felt really overwhelming. And looking back, I actually think a lot of the family struggles we had and a lot of the religious and faith things I was trying to work through, in a way kind of distracted me from some of the isolation of being gay.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that almost it feels like a separate,
Mhm.
all of that confusion and isolation and like church weirdness feels like a
Yeah.
separate container. Um,
Interesting.
and I was able to completely like compartmentalize that and deny that aspect of me. Even though cognitive dissonance is a really weird to try to explain to someone, but like
Yeah.
I knew exactly what was happening and I felt shame and cut off and like a freak, and I felt damned. And also at the same time, I like tied it in this pretty bow to where like I didn't. I don't know. I don't know if that'll resonate with anyone, but
I think you were dealing with it kind of in pieces. I mean, all at once. That's a lot. And correct me if I'm off, but in some ways, you were taking your spiritual reins very much into your own hands around that time because you were sharing just a minute ago, you were very rooted in what you were reading in the scriptures, what you were reading in Holy Writ, and in what your you didn't say relationship, but this is me kind of reading between the lines, your relationship with the divine, your relationship with God, your understanding of that. You were kind of using that to root yourself in while you were navigating, trying to make sense of going back and forth to and from these other things that you were dealing with at the same time.
yeah, it felt like there really wasn't any other option.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm okay with that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not ideal, but I felt like the fire got hot and I was like, all right, I like we either move through it or we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I share that in a totally neutral space. Like, I think I think it's beautiful that you did that. You whether you realized it or not, you were giving yourself permission to follow it in a way that you had the
Yeah,
tools to do so and that felt good and comfortable as much as you could feel in the midst of all that turmoil.
yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that. It was interesting to see how that kind of prepared me for later in life because I didn't know this but I was developing a more nuanced perspective on a lot of things. It was hard and I had
Sure.
questions and I felt scared, but some of these questions that especially like my parents' divorce and like sealing, that was always at the top of my mind. Like, what does this mean for
Yeah.
my family? And
Yeah.
so as I was kind of freaking out and kind of really caring about that, I felt like I got answers. I There was like peace. There was this more nuanced perspective that developed a little bit. When I served my mission, I was 100% expecting to be straight when I returned home. And everything I read from church leaders, like I
Yeah.
knew it all. I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna serve so well. I'm gonna come home. I'm gonna be straight. And it was completely devastating to realize that that wasn't the case.
Hmm.
And I even denied that for a while, but I had a relationship that was going really well with someone I really loved, a young woman, and she's incredible. And I was dating I was dating a ton, and it kind of culminated into this relationship. And I was like, I'm actually doing this. Like, this is amazing. And I was like, it worked. I'm straight. This is awesome. And
That's
then one night it got serious, like our going steady, as older people call it, got serious, and it was kind of a discussion about like what does the next step look like, and I broke, like everything in me just broke because I had to like actually look at myself and realize this didn't happen, and that was, I don't know if I can say it was a more painful faith challenge, but it was something I just felt so unprepared for because I didn't have a parent or siblings or anyone who understood
right.
what that was like, and all of that pretty little bow that I put on my shame and suicidality and depression just like exploded. And
And this was still during a time when it just wasn't talked about very
not
much.
at all, no.
It
And so
still
for me,
wasn't. Yeah.
that was kind of like phase two. I was like, everything just broke and I have to do this again. And that was harder too, because like I was like, I already put everything back together. It worked. I was comfortable. My
Mhm.
faith, like I felt like I understood it. But then this piece that I was denying was
Yeah,
introduced and it shattered all of it. And I felt like I really had to start from scratch again.
that's hard. That's really hard.
Thanks. It is.
Well, gosh, I feel myself going back and forth between happy and excited for you. And I feel these tugs at my heart and the tears almost like at the brim here, because I know some of your story and I know what comes a little bit later. Um, but I think about younger Charlie that you're describing here, you know, as a kid growing up in Missouri and all of this upheaval at once. And then the brave, bold, courageous decision you made. I think it was in 2018,
Mhm.
2019.
2019, I think. Yeah.
You had written your story
Hmm.
without the mask. And I found you shortly thereafter because I learned of my kiddo's identity in 2019. And then I learned of their real identity 2 years later. I have a transgender kiddo. And I remember reading about you. It might have been in articles, news articles, or social media, but your genuine feelings of trepidation and how am I going to be received? And I am putting my heart out there. And I felt it because, I grew up, I'm Gen X. Nobody talked about this, let alone came out in a public way about it. So, in so many ways, you've been a trailblazer in that respect. And you had to, there must have been some growth between when things with this gal you were talking about, you had to face yourself in the mirror yet again. And a lot had to happen before you could get to that point in 2019.
Yeah, a lot did happen. The hard thing about it was this felt like something that nobody understood. Like I was saying, like other
Hmm.
people had divorced parents. A lot of people had serious concerns with like church history, polygamy, priesthood ban. Like those were things that there was like conversation. Not as much as today, but other people were like, "Huh, this feels weird to me." But gay marriage, being gay, was always presented as such a black and white issue.
Yeah.
And so it took a lot of courage to get to the point where I was able to like push back against what I was being like spoon fed, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
and honestly, like the thing that did it for me was personal revelation. And proximity plus personal revelation, because it's the first story I share in my book for a reason, because I ended up taking an internship in Washington, D.C., and for the first time ever associated with other LGBTQ people. And I was expecting them to be demonic, evil, gross. And my whole life, I had done everything I could to hate and avoid gay people because I didn't want to become one. But like in a professional setting, when three of my coworkers, who actually have real jobs, I'm just an intern, are gay and
Mhm.
have pictures of their partners on their desk, you have to interact. And I noticed very quickly that these people felt just like me. It's like, oh my gosh, are we made out of the same material? Like we have the same aesthetic taste and music taste, and we like the same art, and we say the same words, and we have the same vocal inflections. Like it
Right.
just felt like this long lost tribe, and they were good people who served and ran marathons, and they were just normal. And I found this group. It was a part of the like a DC chapter of Affirmation that was going to march in a
Okay.
pride parade. And I just was like, what? Like church, like Mormons, members of the church. And
Yeah.
I showed up and met some of these people, and just fit. I fit. And I remember that night I was so confused. I was like, God, like, what is happening? Because I was told all of these things. I did everything right. And I was so depressed. And now I did the wrong thing, quote unquote. And I
Yeah.
felt hope. Like I'm super confused. And I literally remember thinking, no one in the history of the world has ever been more confused than I am right now. And
Hmm.
then I just thought, there was someone else. And I thought of like the restoration, the story that I grew up with
Mm-hmm.
of if any of you lack wisdom, ask of God, this 14-year-old who wants to know what is salvation? Am I saved? Who set apart time and asked. So the next week I set apart time and I went to the temple and asked, and I felt the hands of redeeming love reach into this dark, crippled space that gay Charlie had been living in and just bring him to the top. I took a breath for the first time ever. I felt so strongly that those principles I've learned, I am a child of God. Someone loves me. There's forgiveness, there's repentance, there's redemption. For the first time ever, those applied to me. For the first time ever, those applied to that part of me that I had just like shoved down and oppressed. And it was almost like it was almost like my DNA changed. There was like a
I believe that. I believe that. I think that's how we peel away the layers and become that new being. And that happens over and over and over again throughout our life. I
yeah,
believe that.
it felt like a chemical reaction almost. I don't know how else to describe it, where at one point I was this, and then there was this love, this God love that was introduced, and it changed the makeup of me. And
All
I just
yourself in alignment from head to toe and beyond.
exactly. And I just remember thinking, I'm different and I have to be different. Like there's no more hiding. Like I can't. I physically could not hide this secret anymore. And that was the change that you referred to. And I don't know where it came from, but all of a sudden I had confidence to talk to people. I had confidence to say, hey, this is wrong. Like we need to build community. There's other people like this. And
Mhm.
I had the confidence to come out to the athletic director at BYU and just start changing things and saying the way we're doing this isn't working on both sides, right? Let's hold ourselves accountable. Let's be, I don't
Mhm.
know. I couldn't, one thing that was hard was that I didn't have anyone to look to
Uh-huh.
growing up. I didn't have a role model or anyone who was even like a point of reference. But after that moment, I was like, it doesn't matter because
Yeah.
like God's my point of reference. So I'm just gonna do what he says.
So I'm curious, you experienced this foundational change of your soul on a very soul, very basic level. And you knew you couldn't hide anymore. You couldn't, like it would go against everything inside of you to do so. And so you started to create community through your words, through your actions, through telling people and being open about it. I'm curious, like even though you had experienced that change and you knew what you were supposed to do, or you knew what you had an idea of what it looked like moving forward, how was that in real time, like in actuality, continuing, like opening your mouth, talking about your experience, sharing who you were, going to the athletic director and speaking your truth and saying, we're doing this wrong on both sides. Like I know how it's been for me. It still can be. There's still some elements of whatever you want to call it, that energy of a little bit of worry, fear, anticipation, anxiety. I think it's, anyway, I'll let you answer and then I'll share a little more.
The change wasn't, it didn't make life easy, but it gave me purpose. And I
Okay.
and I think that's the difference. Like the emotions were all still there. The roller coaster, the fear, the trepidation, the shame. Like I had to work through everything, and I still do. And like shifting policies and feeling misunderstood or feeling lonely,
Yeah.
so lonely
Yes.
and just different, like different from family, different from friends. Like the word queer like actually feels super applicable to me now because I'm like I am just different and sometimes that's hard.
Hmm.
But but it was that purpose that allowed me to like still move through it.
Yeah. Step into it.
And so it's like I don't know, the visual I'm getting is like a sea that's like tossing and like a raging sea. It didn't
Mhm.
calm the sea, not yet, but
Yeah.
it gave me the purpose to keep going through the storm.
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to ask you and kind of draw some attention to this concept is because I think it's easy for folks to assume just because a person is choosing to speak up and speak out, not in a negative way, just in a way of, this is me, this is my truth, this is my life experience, this is what I have found, and try to have some type of, you know, mutual dialogue, right? Just because a person is choosing to do that doesn't mean it's not hard. It doesn't mean there aren't all of these crazy, chaotic, conflicting, even cognitive dissonance, all these emotions still bubbling up. I think that it's always going to be that way. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, of course, it gets stronger. But then it's almost like, okay, now you're presented with this situation. The ante's up a little bit.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
it requires some new muscles to be built that maybe weren't there before, if that makes sense.
totally.
I just, I just strongly believe that change can't happen unless we learn collectively how to find our own safety to share our own truths, whatever that might be, whether it's your LGBTQ plus identity, whether it's your beliefs or questions or doubts about whatever in church history, or just making room for all along the spectrum for wherever we are at, and not making, we don't have to make it mean anything. It doesn't have to be positive. It doesn't have to be negative. It can just be, this is my experience. And can we create some kind of community around that?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the new position that I took kind of required me to become strong in the areas that were weakest.
Okay.
And that's why part of why it was so hard because, for 22 years, I was completely ashamed of even doing anything that looked even remotely gay. And now I have to be confident in that. And a lot of that switched like as I came out and found purpose and started building community that was not without pushback, right? And some of those were people I deeply,
Absolutely.
genuinely cared about, like best friends, family members who were like just like disassociating themselves from me, moving away, expressing distaste, disgust,
Mhm.
creating rumors, like all of those things that I was afraid people would do. A lot of them happened, and a lot of them still happen. And so when you were talking about like exercising some of those muscles, I think confidence, setting boundaries, managing my own internal dialogue and anxiety, like so much of that, like it exposed all of that. And that's just been really hard to work through and really mentally and emotionally draining sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's not until I look back a little bit, I can say, oh, I've actually grown a lot in that area.
Yeah.
Like I'm still stressed and I lose sleep over this person and what they said about me, who I love and who I miss. And it's better than it was 4 weeks
Mhm.
ago. Like I'm stronger a little bit there. So
Yeah. That and piece is so, so important. So
it
go ahead.
a lot of the piece for me has been because like that change in me attracted other people who had also changed in a similar way
Mm.
and continually attracts people who do change. And I hope I change more, right? I hope I keep
I hope
having
we do.
I don't know if there will ever be as dramatic of a shift as I experienced that day. But when people, it's
Mhm.
been really cool to like have this new community and like connect with friends and family and loved ones who are like, oh, I see you. I get it. Like we're here together.
Mhm.
And that community to me is so much more emboldening than the community I used to try to protect through hiding. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So talking about this concept of community, so one of the reasons lots of reasons I really wanted to have you on was to talk about this next thing. I chatted with you briefly after the Gather conference last fall, and you were interviewed along with another couple that is married that is same sex. And your stories touched me so deeply. And you shared a story about how the congregation you're currently in, well, at the time, I don't know, I'm assuming that's the same.
Yeah, same place.
Okay. Figuratively and literally made space for you and your newlywed husband. And I love symbolism. I love analogy. I love visual concepts. I'm a visual learner. And it just stuck with me how beautiful it was that there was this family who turned, I think, their upstairs into an apartment so that you guys, you both could have a safe space to live,
Yeah,
physically live, and in your spiritual community, your faith community. And the main theme I can see coming from that action is just love. They didn't have to understand why you had made the choices that you had made up to that point. They didn't even have to agree with them. They didn't have to feel anything about them. I'm sure many did and still do, possibly, but the concept is still fairly novel. And I just, what did that do for you? I just want to hear from you. Like, I know you shared it that day at the conference, but like, what did that mean to you to have this happen for the two of you?
I get emotional every time I think about it because the fear, the absolute dread of making the happiest decision of my life was crippling. It was so scary to think like I love this person. I feel I want to spend my life with him, and I'm brave enough to make this decision and claim him. But the consequences on the other side of that and the potential what ifs were insurmountable. And I
Mhm.
spent months agonizing over that. And right now church policy is very confusing. It's like the membership restrictions or not for same-sex married couples is completely dependent on bishop and stake president. And that's really scary. It's scary for all of us. And I have dear friends who have ended up in the wrong quote like the wrong ward with someone and they've been
Mhm.
disfellowshipped or had their records removed. And that it was more like I don't know if I'll ever be able to express in words that fear. And I was consumed in trying to find like our apartment determines our membership, basically. It's a
Yeah.
ton of pressure, and we're moving from a single adult ward. And so it's not like, your bishop or your stake president beforehand. You just have to. So I was praying a lot, and I wanted to live in the area where Ryan's parents lived. And because people knew us, they knew his
Mhm.
family
Mhm.
there. It wasn't such like a blind introduction, but
Yeah.
it's like such an established, expensive area. It's like impossible for a newlywed couple to live there. And at
Mhm.
this point, like I just graduated from a master's program. I was like, we can't afford to live there. This is insane. Um, but my mother-in-law heard us talking about this, and they were also, everyone was really attuned to like what's going to happen here. And she texted the ward group chat and was like, hey, here's the situation. If anyone has a place like an apartment, we would love to check it out. And on the other side, this woman who lived just one street over had read both of my books that week and like said this prayer and said, hey God, like send me ways to help people like this kid, this Charlie Bird kid. I want to find people like that. And literally like an hour later, this text comes through, and and she saw it and recognized it for what it was and said, okay, bring the construction crew over. We're doing this. Like like you said, literally made a space for us. And it was interesting because I was overwhelmed and like flooded with relief. And I didn't know the bishop and I didn't know the stake president and I didn't know most of the ward, but I just knew that God had done something. And it was almost like he said, here's the next step, step on it, and it'll hold you up. And so often I feel like I'm like crossing this in my mind, I'm crossing the Grand Canyon, and there's these little glass steps that just float. and God will say, "Hey, step on it." And I'm like, it's made of glass and it's going to fall and there's nothing supporting it. And then I just get this feeling and I think God's like, you can step, trust me, I put this here, and I step on it. And so right now, me and my husband are perched on that glass step and we're floating out somewhere, probably towards the not very far side of the canyon. I don't know how far we've gone across the divide, but we're floating there and we're waiting for the next step. And it's scary, but it's like so humbling and beautiful to be like, wow, God, you love me so much. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if any of that makes sense, but
Yes, I receive that. I hear you and I see you. And I'm grateful that there are individuals out there in leadership positions that have not just open minds, but genuinely open hearts. I would wonder, what would you have? Let's say, like, there are leaders listening who, and I'm going to expand this beyond the LDS faith background because I do interview folks of all faith backgrounds. So my listeners are varied. What would you want those in ecclesiastical leadership to understand what this experience did for you, for your husband? And you've probably answered this to some extent, but if you were to be talking to them, like face to face, all of them, I mean, LGBTQ individuals are in every congregation, whether they are aware of it or not. They are there.
yeah.
What would you have them know?
The thing this ward, and I just love my leaders so much. The thing they did is they sat down with us and they said, "Hey, like we want to get to know you, share your story."
Mhm.
And there was like so much grace on both sides of this because and I think I noticed a personal responsibility for us to not have unrealistic expectations, and we just came with really open palms and said we just want a faith community, and we felt inspired to move here, and we just want to be wherever we can.
Mhm.
And they also had open palms and said, we're not sure how to handle this. This doesn't happen often.
Mhm.
But what do you need? What have you been through? And it kind
Mhm.
of became this dialogue. I mean, the first time we met with our bishop, we just talked for 3 hours.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he really took the time to see us and was able then to lead by example for the rest of the ward and just be like, hey, there's a new family in the ward and we love them and we're happy that they're here. And I think that level of proximity and openness did so much, and it allowed us to feel like we had a spiritual home, and it also allowed other people to like notice our what we could add
Yeah.
and to like ask us to be involved. Like my husband's a really good cook in preparing food, and someone in the ward was in charge of like a steak like relief society dinner,
Mhm.
and she invited us to help, and it was awesome. Like we loved it and he did a good job, and we were able to just kind of like
I love
make it
that.
pretty and delicious. And it's been really cool how like symbiotic the relationship has been because there
Mhm.
was that initial moment of openness.
What I love about this is the focus was not on a handbook with a list of cans and can'ts and do's and do nots. There didn't seem to be as much of a focus on that as there was on what do you need? I love that question so much. It was like, I mean, I get that they were limited in what they could do, but they were seeing more of you as human beings and less as um, something to refer to in a handbook, how to treat you, how to quote, deal with you. I don't like that word, but that's
Yeah.
what's coming to mind.
Yeah, I think there was a ton of focus on policy in the handbook, but it was coming from a place, not a place of how do we deal with you, how do we punish you. It was how do we offer as many of the blessings of the gospel of Christ to this family as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that shift
Mm-hmm.
allowed for some creativity and being like, oh, let's, it just brought Jesus into it. It wasn't a handbook, it was a handbook plus Jesus.
And that takes someone willing to follow their heart, someone willing to, like you said, be creative in their approach, be creative in the way that they approach the situation, and think outside of the box.
Right.
And one thing I have learned as a parent of a transgender kiddo, I learned through and continue to learn through this journey how much myself and we kind of in general as humans, we look so much to external criteria or cues to kind of size somebody up, or communities or cultures or peoples or whatever. And that causes us to miss the heart. And I have learned to see souls. I've learned to see hearts and focus less on the external of um, behaviors or clothing or whatever that might be, living situations. Just see the human being that's
Yeah.
sitting in front of me.
That's beautiful. And to me, that feels like the gospel.
Me
That
too.
feels like that going back to
Um,
that place I tried to root myself when I was younger,
yes.
that platform of this is the teachings of Jesus Christ. I'm going to deal with my questions. I'm going to deal with the shelf, but I'm going to root myself here. That to me feels like that rooted place.
Yes. So I've kept you longer than I was anticipating, so I apologize. Just, we didn't really get to talk too much about the joy. I know that your finding Ryan had to have brought you so much joy. If there's anything you want to add, speaking to the joy you have found as you have taken the reins of your spiritual sovereignty, please offer that.
I feel like I found something that, well, I did find something that I didn't know existed. I found someone who understands my background, someone who's born in the same year as me. Like we know the same memes and jokes, and we like in high school, the same months we were like his prom was the same day as my prom, even though we were in two different parts of the country. And it's just so fun. Like we have such similar taste in music, which has been fun and probably expected because we're gay men and like surprise we like Lady Gaga. um, but it's just fun to like to
Yeah,
connect on that level of like watching the same silly YouTube videos growing up. I don't know, just something about that has been fun,
beautiful.
but paired with the same values, the same religious background, the same seminary courses, there's so much similarity. And despite the differences that we have, I never thought I would like I always thought I would have to give something up. And I'm giving up a lot, right? But I thought with a partner, I would have to either have someone who I thought I'd have to have someone who fundamentally misunderstood one of the most important parts of my being. Because out like at the time, like the thought of an out gay active LDS man who was compatible with me and emotionally mature, like excuse me, like how does that happen? But I
Yeah,
found him.
what a
and
gift.
and it is a gift. It's so fun, it's so
It really is
freeing,
the little things. It's the little things.
and it's just it's so light.
That's great.
um
I love that.
and it just makes me so happy for all of those times that I stood scared on one of those transparent steps,
Hmm.
because at one point we both like at one point I was waiting on a step and he was waiting on a step, and it was the same step,
That's
and
great.
then we got to show up there together.
That's
And the companionship of that makes all the hard stuff so much more
beautiful. Thank,
tolerable.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So, just one final question and then some quick for fun ones, but share with us what living beyond the shadow of doubt means to you.
Living beyond the shadow of doubt, to me, it to me it doesn't mean living without doubt.
Mhm.
It just means like looking to the light.
Mm.
I think like faith and doubt are so in my life, they've been so ingrained. Like faith
Yeah.
almost equals doubt. Like
They're two
they're just
sides of
like
the same
two
coin.
sides of the same coin. But it's like trusting in the I don't know, it sounds a little bit trite, but like when you're shadowed by doubt, just sit through it and
Hmm.
it'll pass. Like the sun rises the next day and there's
Yeah,
going to be this interplay. And I just think I like traveling in the day, right? I like traveling in the faith and waiting in the doubt.
I love it. That's so beautiful. So really quickly, Charlie, just looking for one, maybe two-word answers, okay? Tell us your
Okay.
favorite book.
The Alchemist.
Oh, that was fast. I love it. I know the answer to this next one. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm an extrovert. Surprise.
Tell us who your favorite artist is.
Musically, Taylor Swift, obviously.
Oh, I knew that.
Painting,
I
life
knew
art,
that.
Paul Cézanne.
Okay. Are you a night owl or a morning lark?
Night owl, definitely.
Do you do still or carbonated water or diet soda or some other fun beverage?
Still water. I'm just always drinking
Oh,
normal water.
okay. Tell us your celebrity crush.
Am I allowed to say my husband?
Yeah.
He's not quite a celebrity, but
And then,
um,
no,
I'm trying to think of who else. This is so embarrassing, but like growing up, I had the biggest crush on Aladdin's dad from Aladdin 3, which is so funny thinking back. So look him up. I was like, he did
that's
not need to be that handsome.
that's fantastic. Love it. Okay. And then finally, the furthest place you've traveled.
Probably Istanbul with a layover in Moscow.
Wow. That's very specific. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
So if folks wanted to reach out to you or connect with you with questions, whatever, what's the best way for them to do that?
Follow me on Instagram. I'm doing better at going through my DMs.
Okay.
I there's no way I can get to everyone, but I try.
Hmm.
And I have someone who kind of helps me now. So yeah, Mr. Charlie Bird on Instagram. And also I have a podcast called All Out in the Open that I co-host with Ben Shalati. And that's also a place to have more of my thoughts and
Yeah.
story and things like that.
I will make sure and include the links to all of that in the show notes. Charlie, it has been so much fun. Thank you. I know this will touch so many hearts. I appreciate you and all the work you're doing and the trailblazer that you are. Blessings, love, and light to you.
Thank you. That was a really fun conversation.
Thanks. Writer, teacher, author, Mormon scholar, and founder of Dialogue Journal, Eugene England said, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue." As a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, my hope is that Living Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast is an extension of that vision. Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com to find this podcast and additional free resources, including the link for a complimentary coaching session. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more or to send me a DM. Help the podcast grow. Please follow, review, and share with a friend.